Hi everyone, Nora Crone here. I'm a violist in New York City and a musician's focal dystonia recovery advocate. And today I'm going to be talking about why the recovery process for musicians' focal dystonia can be so unpredictable. So before I go any further, I just want to briefly summarize my recovery experience so you know where I'm coming from. So I was diagnosed with musician's focal dystonia in 2018, and my symptoms, which were curling in my left hand ring and pinky fingers, were relatively mild. They were so mild, actually, that despite the fact that I could barely function as a professional musician, the neurologist who diagnosed me said it was too early for Botox and that I should just wait for the symptoms to get worse and come back in a year. At that point, however, I had already done my own research and concluded that I actually wasn't interested in Botox because it seemed that a small but significant number of musicians had managed to go further than just treating the symptoms. They'd actually recovered through some form of retraining. Now, as I mentioned in previous videos, for me, the retraining solution that ultimately proved effective in eliminating my dystonic symptoms was a system of string playing called the Till approach, developed by a violinist named Sophie Till. I also practiced meditation, and I did quite a bit of soul searching and general reconditioning of my nervous system, but none of that was an explicit part of my retraining process. So Sophie and I worked together over 2 years to deconstruct and reconstruct my playing from the ground up. And in 2021, I returned to professional playing. I'm also now part of the faculty at the Till Project, which seeks to spread information about healthy string playing far and wide. And I'm delighted to be able to share that information with you. So when I talk about the recovery process, I'm actually referring to something very specific, which is a core set of principles based on concrete physical logic and the application of those principles to the act of playing an instrument and making music with it. If you want to know more about what these principles are and what sets the Till approach apart from other approaches to string technique and focal dystonia recovery, I invite you to check out some of my previous videos. You can also check out the Till Project website, and I'll link to both down below. Okay, so by the time I discovered the Till Project, I'd actually already been attempting a mostly self-directed protocol of retraining for about a year. It was a combination of generic finger exercises I'd learned at a seminar, along with just playing slowly and observing my body. The results were pretty mixed, but my dystonic symptoms were so mild, relatively speaking, that I figured I couldn't have too much farther to go in my recovery when I met Sophie. So it was honestly devastating to realize in my first few lessons with her that there was a lot more going on under the surface of my dystonia than what I'd been able to perceive, and that undoing all of that dysfunction was not going to be a quick fix. And I want to speak to that sense of devastation for a second, because it's possible that you're feeling some degree of that right now. Now, I don't know if you can relate, but throughout my recovery process, I had to do daily battle with doubt. And by doubt, I mean, is this ever really going to get better? Am I really going to be able to play symptom-free ever again? Or, okay, yeah, but when will it get better? In a few months? A year? 10 years? And part of why I'm making these videos is to contribute to the narrative that yes, you can get better. Yes, you can create symptom-free playing for yourself. And no, it doesn't have to take 10 years. But we have to acknowledge the inherent uncertainty that pervades the entire territory of dystonia, in part because its origins still aren't clear, even to experts, and in part because so many of us have tried so many things and spent a lot of time and money on strategies that haven't worked. So even as I started to see progress from the work that Sophie and I were doing together, my feelings of discomfort and lack of control over my fingers persisted, particularly with certain triggers. And that ongoing discomfort and sense of dysfunction, even as it gradually became more and more limited in scope, was enough to make me doubt the whole thing, more or less constantly. It wasn't until I was basically back on stage playing professionally that I could finally allow myself to admit that not only had the process worked, it would actually enable me to continue growing as a musician long after all of the dystonic symptoms were in the distant past. Interestingly, a violinist friend of mine also recovered from musician's focal dystonia via the TIL approach, and yet the timeline of her experience was completely different. Her symptoms were actually more severe than mine, but whereas I had to spend over 2 years and ascend to a pretty high-level understanding of the approach before it felt like my dystonic symptoms were mostly gone, her symptoms began to disappear almost immediately and were practically gone in less than a year, and then she stuck around to learn the rest of the technique. So what's the deal here? Doesn't it follow that if someone's level of injury or dystonic symptoms are milder than someone else's, that they should recover more quickly? Unfortunately, the answer, I recognize, is pretty dissatisfying. Everyone's trajectory and timeline for recovery is individual and impossible to predict. The reasons for that are as complex as the individuals themselves. Our personalities, our personal histories, and cognitive traits, our life circumstances, how damaging our prior training was, physically, neurologically, psychologically, or all of the above. And that's just to name a few factors. So if, like I was for 3 long years, you're just desperate for someone to tell you when you'll be able to play freely and comfortably again if you commit to the specific type of retraining I'm describing, I don't have any ironclad guarantees to offer. But I do have some certainties to share that I hope will be reassuring. So here goes. First of all, regardless of your perspective on what exactly causes dystonia, more and more scientists are coming around to the idea that neuroplastic retraining is an effective long-term treatment. Neuroplasticity as a general principle has been broadly confirmed by scientific research. In short, you can change your brain in all sorts of ways through intentioned practice. The dysfunction wrought by dystonia is reversible. Second, if we situate that neuroplastic retraining in a truly healthy and efficient approach to playing that relies on the same concrete logic that we employ in daily life, not only is the recovery process more reliable, we come out of it feeling better and playing better than we ever did before. We do not know how long it will take in individual cases, but wiring intentional movement that the brain and body recognize as fundamentally healthy and suitable to the task of playing gradually resolves dysfunction. At least it did for me and for many others I know. Lastly, as I mentioned before, we never know when we start the process how much is underneath our surface complaint of dystonic symptoms, or pain, or even just a sense of not fulfilling our artistic potential. Part of what makes the recovery process so challenging is that it requires us to change, to let go of deeply ingrained physical, cognitive, emotional, and psychological habits that we've clung to for many years and that often feel tied up with our identity. But paradoxically, the more we have to be willing to let go of in order to complete the recovery process, the more we have to gain. Who we emerge as on the other side is actually who we've been all along underneath all of that other stuff. So sticking it out through that challenging process means that in the end, not only do we get to make music again, we really get to be ourselves doing it. And what could be more rewarding than that? So I hope this video has been useful and has given you a little bit of encouragement and information. If so, I'd love it if you hit like and subscribe, and please share it with others who you think could benefit. I'm Nora Crone, and my website is www.noracrone.com. So feel free to check it out or get in touch if you want to know more. Take care. I'll see you next time.